welcome to the 4th Annual National Discussion on Government Openness to help end a successful Sunshine Week. Often we kick off Sunshine Week, but this year we're bringing up the end. I'm your moderator, Patrice McDermott, the director of OpenTheGovernment.org, and we have a nice banner there in the front if you can see it. Our co-sponsors for this event are the American Association of Law Libraries, the American Library Association, Association of Research Libraries, Center for American Progress, League of Women Voters, National Freedom of Information Coalition, Public Citizen, Special Libraries Association, Sunshine Week, and Sunlight Foundation. And we appreciate all of our partners and others who have helped to get word out about this event. I am grateful to my co-sponsors for their help in creating this event and making it a success. This year, we are webcasting live from the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C. I want to thank John Podesta, President and CEO of CAP, for graciously hosting this event for us this year. The Center is a partner in OpenTheGovernment.org, which is a coalition of organizations committed to promoting government openness and accountability and pushing back secrecy. CAP is also on our steering committee, and Reese Rushing, who is here in the audience, is one of our committee members. The staff at CAP has been wonderfully helpful to us and very patient. As always, we thank all of you who are joining us live in the studio and those of you watching at meetings in your communities or from your computers at your office or on your bed or wherever you're watching from. Remote audiences, please call in or email questions throughout the show. To email, you can send the questions to questions@openthegovernment.org, questions@openthegovernment.org, or you can call to 202-478-5325 or 202-478-5326. Please be aware that we will not be able to get to all of you, but we will do our best. As many of you know, I hope everybody in this room knows, on his first day in office, President Obama sent a memorandum to his administration on transparency and open government, asking them to develop recommendations for an open government directive that moves government toward being transparent, participatory, and collaborative. Exciting times and much different from our past administration. Of course, as we celebrate Sunshine Week, we are excited and curious about the changes ahead. And just yesterday, the Attorney General issued the new Freedom of Act FOIA guidelines. We have them posted on our site. I know a number of people in this audience also have them posted on their site. Our website is www.openthegovernment.org, and many of our partners have them up as well. They build on, codify, as it were, and expand to some extent the directives that President Obama gave the first day that he was in office. Today we have a panel of distinguished guests to discuss what the Obama administration hopes to achieve with the new directive, the vision for e-government, the plans for financial and economic transparency, and the policy issues and opportunities facing this administration. We are honored to welcome today Vivek Kundra, the Federal Chief Information Officer for this administration. He formerly served in Mayor Fenty's cabinet as the Chief Technology Officer for the District of Columbia, and in 2008 was recognized as the IT Executive of the Year. Next, we also welcome Dr. Beth Novick, who is heading up the implementation of the President's Memorandum on Transparency and Open Government out of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and who has previously directed the Institute for Information and Law Policy at the New York Law School. And I recommend her writings to you, particularly her Wiki Government. We're out of order. Catherine McFate is a program officer for Government Performance and Accountability in the Ford Foundation's Governance and Civil Society Unit, where she examines and promotes the role of the state in achieving peace and social justice in the United States and beyond. And last but not least, Dan Chinnock, who was a member of the President's Technology, Innovation, and Government Reform, or TIGR, team, transition team. He was also a former branch chief for information policy and technology in the Office of Management and Budget, and he's currently senior vice president of Pragmatics. We thank each of you for joining us here today. So Vivek, let's start with you. You are in charge of e-government and information technology, if I'm right, for the executive branch. What are the plans of the administration in those fields?
So a couple of big things that we have planned out in terms of embracing open government, driving that agenda, and as you mentioned, that was the President's first memorandum, and it shows you the commitment of this administration to an open, transparent government. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about give you some context as far as the federal government is concerned. We've got over 10,000 systems. And a lot of these systems, frankly, are deployed with technologies that are 20 to 30 years old. So part of what we're looking at is rationalizing $71 billion of spend on information technology to look at the procurement process and say, well, how do we ensure that from the very beginning we bake transparency into how we procure technology and how we architect systems. So we begin with a default understanding that systems and information will be transparent rather than a default view that we're going to begin by closing everything up and then arbitrarily decide what will and will not be transparent. Second thing we have to recognize is that as we look at the economic crisis we're in and the two wars that we're in the middle of, is that as a function of priorities and ensuring that from a transparency perspective, it's more important now than ever. And how do we make sure from that perspective that we put data and information in the hands of the public? A good example where we've begun is the Recovery Act implementation with the launch of recovery.gov. And as more and more money flows out, more and more data will be available in the coming months and weeks ahead. But the challenge also we have to recognize is that it's not going to happen overnight and it won't be easy. And we're ensuring that from an agency perspective, as money is spent, that you're able to track it. And we're going to have to look at it from a perspective of an ecosystem, not just the federal government putting out that information, but also relying on organizations such as yours and the Sunlight Foundation to help us look at that data that's democratized and look at patterns so that we can hold people accountable, we can hold public officials accountable, whether that's at the federal level, state level, or local level, and the private sector for that matter. And one of the initiatives we plan to launch is a data.gov, where we plan to transform the way the federal government pushes out information. And think of two examples that I love to use. One is what the NIH did with the Human Genome Project. What it decided to do is put out all that information in the public domain rather than locking it up. There's a classical battle going on between Craig Venter and Francis Collins in the 90s when it came to the Human Genome Project. And there was a shotgun technique on the private sector side versus what the NIH was doing in terms of decoding the human genome. But with other world bodies in the NIH, when that information was put out in the public domain, what we saw was massive explosion in discovery in medicine, and also personalized medicine for that matter. Same way, another example is what happened with the Department of Defense and satellites. When the Defense Department decided to release the coordinates of that information, you're able to create a whole new industry around geospatial. And you were able to navigate all across the country. And for that matter, we're looking at vast array of data that the federal government has, and we're going line item by line item and figuring out how do we quickly put that in the public domain and ensure that it's easy to use, easy to process, and readily available.
Thank you. And by the way, we're going to do questions from the audience live and remote at the end of all of these presentations, not at the end of each speaker. Vivek, one of the concerns that we hear expressed regularly is that the CIOs across the executive branch are too focused on technology for what seems its own sake, on the tubes and the wires and that, and don't seem to understand or care that the technology